Yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman, of the sponsor of the bill, Mr. DeSantis.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Well, I thank the chairman for that, and I got to tell you, I am listening to the other side. I don't know what world they're living in. We didn't have a hearing on the bill. I testified at the hearing. I don't think I made that up. I think that happened. The idea that we're going to be reporting people's names and phone numbers for this bill, no. The Attorney General will go and say we've established a policy not to enforce Obamacare mandates, for example, because we have a situation now where these policies are illegal under the law. So if you actually looked up the law, they'd be illegal. But the executive branch taking the position they're not going to enforce that for a couple years. And so there's a divergence between the law in the books and the law in action, and those are the types of instances, policy decisions not to enforce, that will be done. And that ultimately is what we're talking about here. Some people want different policy outcomes one way or another, but the important part of this is we're talking about power, and we're talking about authority. So in some of these instances, I don't agree with those Obamacare mandates. I'd like to get them off the books. So policy-wise, I agree with that. But as a matter of authority, the President cannot simply suspend that law that was enacted. And that ultimately is what we're talking about. Clarity in how the government is operating. Ultimately, the power resides with the American people, not with members of Congress or with the President. The people loan power under the Constitution, and then we exercise that authority consistent with the power that they've delegated to us. We have the authority under Article 1 of the Constitution to legislate, and we have the exclusive authority to legislate. The President has the duty to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. He does not have authority delegated him to amend, suspend, or change duly enacted laws. And this is a fundamental principle of our constitutional system, that there are separated powers and checks and balances. George Washington, in his farewell address, admonished the nation that to preserve these checks must be as necessary as to institute them. And the problem that I keep running into is I don't know what the limiting principle in some of these things are. If you can suspend the Obamacare insurance mandates, and you can suspend the business mandate, you can suspend the individual mandate, can a Republican president come in and just suspend the whole shebang? If not, why not? What's the difference? And just to make no mistake about it, when there is a Republican president, there's going to be pressure on that president to suspend provisions of law that those voters who elected that individual don't like. And if we start going back and forth, where one side enforces what they like, the other side enforces what they like, then you don't really have a legislative body passing laws. We are essentially passing suggestions, and then it's ultimately the executive who determines what will be enforced and what will not be enforced. That is not a road we want to go down to. And the good thing about this bill is it's just saying put your cards on the table. If you're going to not enforce certain provisions of law, then report it to Congress and let us know about that.
Madam Speaker, I would yield the gentleman an additional 3 minutes.
The gentleman has an additional 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so put your cards on the table. We should not, in Congress, have to rely on a leak to the press or find a blog post or look in some footnote in some unrelated federal rule to know whether some of these things are being suspended. And the American people deserve to know whether or not their laws are being enforced. And so at the end of the day, this is really a transparency provision. It's worked with, in terms of the constitutional questions, Attorney General Gonzalez, Mukasey, and Holder have reported to the Congress when the federal government has adopted policies of non-enforcement due to constitutional concerns. So this says if you're going to take the position that as a matter of policy you're not going to enforce clear mandates in law, then provide that to us, offer your justification so that we can evaluate it. And ultimately, I think it's now just common parlance in the press here that a lot of these Obamacare delays are done to help Democrats in the midterm election, that maybe they won't lose as many seats if you can do that. Well, I mean, this is stuff that I think the American people need to know. That's a completely unacceptable reason to suspend laws. So ultimately, I'd urge my colleagues to support this bill. It's the only way it could potentially be burdensome is if there are people throughout the bureaucracy that are instituting non-enforcement policies left and right. The average federal official does not have the authority to decide to institute a policy of non-enforcement. They may be able to institute discretion on a case-by-case basis, but as I was a prosecutor, couldn't just decide not to enforce drug laws anymore. So some of this stuff is a red herring. So I thank the chairman for yielding me the time. I thank the chairman of the full committee for offering this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.